The multi-bagger approach to investing has a few quirks, and it requires us to kind of change our mindset on a few fronts. I've come to the conclusion, and it's actually a pretty, it took me a long time to figure this out, but I think for most of you it would seem obvious, is if there is such a thing as a best approach out of all of these approaches, the best approach, I think, would be one where one focuses on multi-baggers, businesses that can be a 10x in 10 years or less, or maybe 100x in 20 years or less. If one focused purely on the multi-baggers, there are some advantages that come up with that approach. One advantage is that one doesn't have much in terms of taxes, because you'll be holding businesses for a long time. Under most jurisdictions around the world, until the positions are sold, unrealized gains are not taxed. So basically, it gives you an advantage. And depending on the place on the planet that you practice this, sometimes the tax rates can be as high as, 40, 50%. Deferring that for decades, or let's say 10 years or more, is a huge advantage, because you get a free interest-free loan from the government. So there's an advantage in terms of taxes with this approach. The second advantage is that you don't have this continuous treadmill of needing to, find something undervalued, then it gets, fairly valued, and then you sell it, and then you go look for something else. So the multi-bagger approach to investing has a few quirks, and it requires us to kind of change our mindset on a few fronts. So one of the changes one has to make is that, traditionally when one looks at what Ben Graham, kind of the father of value investing, taught us, is that you buy something for well below what it's worth, and then as it approaches fair value, you sell the position, and then you go look for something else. But in the multi-bagger framework, what you would do is you would actually not particularly care if a position became fully valued or even overvalued. So for example, if you bought, a business for 30, 40 cents on the dollar, and it's growing, that dollar is growing, and at some point it's worth $1.50, for example. It's gone up more than 50% over what it used to be worth. But the stock is trading at $2, for example. So under traditional Grahamian approaches, you would sell that as you get past the $1.50 or whatever. But in the quest for multi-baggers, you would continue to keep it in your portfolio even when it became overvalued. You would sell it if it became egregiously overvalued. So one would need to distinguish between something that's overvalued and something that's egregiously overvalued. When you identify and find these exceptional great businesses, which have very high returns on equity, very long runways, very great managers, very deep moats, you go all in. And ideally, you try to find them small, and then it's set it and forget it. So just to give you a little bit of the Cliff Notes version of the Nick Sleep letters, is Nick understood this notion really well, that when you find great businesses with great runways, run by great managements, that you take the mindset of an owner and not an investor. So in 2013, when he was, just before he shut down his funds, he was running about $3 billion in capital. And 40% of the capital was invested in Amazon. So about 1.2 billion was in Amazon stock. And then Costco and Berkshire Hathaway made up almost the rest of the portfolio. So 90% of the portfolio was Amazon, Costco, and Berkshire Hathaway. Okay, that's how he was running his portfolio. the UK regulators were giving him a lot of grief, saying you cannot have all this risk in a portfolio with so much money in one position, and that you need to diversify. And it went against every bone in his body because he understood Amazon really well. He did not want to change, even 10 years from now, his Amazon position, because he understood that business was exceptional. At that time in 2014, Amazon was $300 a share. Now it's 3,300 or more than that. So what he did with his partner, Zach, is he wrote to his investors saying, look, I'm returning all your capital. I'm shutting down my funds. We've had a good run. They compounded at about 20% a year for 14 years. And Nick and his partner, I'm estimating, got maybe somewhere between 100 and 200 million each from all the fees and gains and such that they had made. And they kept their stake in these three companies. So, for example, if Nick got 100 million, half of it was in Amazon and maybe the rest of it is Berkshire and Costco, and he kept it that way. And you can imagine what that did to his net worth. It's worked out very well. And he pretty much outperformed almost any managers I know of. And he's been driving these race cars on racetracks. He's taking long bike rides. He's go skiing. He's not doing much work. I would say in terms of actual work, I don't know, maybe 100 hours a year or something. So the learning from him was that when you identify and find these exceptional great businesses, which have very high returns on equity, very long runways, very great managers, very deep moats, you go all in. And ideally, you try to find them small, and then it's set it and forget it. And it's similar to what this book in 1972 came out, talks about the 100 to 1 in stock market returns. I think even though the book is 48 years old, I think it's timeless. So I think these were the big lessons for me, which is I was always an investor who said, okay, find an undervalued asset and sell it at full price. Like, for example, when I bought our investment in Turkey, I said, okay, this is very undervalued. We'll have a good run. At some point, we'll move on. I don't think about it that way anymore. We own 1/3 of that business, which means that out of the 12 million square feet, 4 million square feet belongs to us, my fund investors. I like that business. The managers are really good. And we will keep that business for a long time. And so that's a completely different mindset from what I had before when I was trying to do these precise calculations of intrinsic value and all of that. We're not doing that. So that's the big change.